I should have known something was off when Mom called me during work hours and didn't start the call with a complaint. Instead, her voice was sweet, almost suspiciously so, like she was trying out a personality that didn't quite fit. I'm Marissa, 35, a financial controller for a biotech firm in San Francisco. Numbers make sense. People. Not always. So when Claire said Greg booked a villa in Malibu and you're coming too, I thought she meant vacation. Turns out she meant nanny. They gave me the maid's room, no keycard. And 3 hours after arrival, I was reheating mashed peas while they drank Veuve in the hot tub I wasn't allowed to use. Marissa, sweetheart, I have the most wonderful idea, she said. I paused, one hand still hovering over my keyboard. My team had just wrapped a complex financial model for a startup Series B, and my brain was still swimming in spreadsheets. What's going on, Mom? She said Claire and Greg were planning a small honeymoon, nothing fancy, just a few days in Malibu at a villa they'd rented, and wouldn't it be lovely if the whole family came along to celebrate? They want company on their prost. Honeymoon? I asked, eyebrows raised. Well, it's more of a family gathering, she said, brushing it off. We thought it'd be the perfect chance to reconnect, especially since you've been so busy lately. You've been working so hard. You could use the break. The part of me that had just turned down a promotion to stay closer to home to maybe rebuild what always felt like a fragile bridge with my family wanted to believe her. I wanted to think maybe this was her trying to be different, trying to include me. I told her I'd think about it. She sounded thrilled. Before I hung up, she added casually, "Don't worry about anything. We'll handle the arrangements. Just bring yourself." I met Reagan that evening for drinks near my apartment in San Francisco. We'd been roommates in college, the kind of friend who always saw straight through polite facades. They invited you to a honeymoon, she said, stirring her drink. You do realize this is code for free babysitting, right? I laughed, but it didn't quite reach my chest. Maybe it'll be different this time. She didn't laugh. Mar, it's never different. They don't see you unless they need you. A few days later, I found myself driving down the Pacific Coast Highway, the ocean to my right shimmering beneath the sun. I told myself I was doing this to be present, to not be the distant sister they always claimed I was. Maybe, just maybe, if I showed up enough, they'd stop seeing me as the cold one. The villa was stunning. Nestled into the hillside above Carbon Beach, it had whitewashed walls, wide windows, and a view that made you want to believe in second chances. Claire greeted me at the door in a linen romper and bare feet, glowing in the way only women newly married or deeply admired by their mothers seem to glow. She hugged me lightly, then stepped back. You look good, she said. Long drive. Not too bad, I said, setting down my bag. This place is beautiful. Right, Greg's cousin knew someone who manages luxury rentals. We got a deal. Come on, I'll show you your room. She led me past the open living space where Greg was assembling a cheese board with our dad's help, and Mom sat on the patio sipping wine like she hadn't orchestrated this entire event with spreadsheets and guilt. Claire stopped in front of a small guest room at the end of the hallway. It had a twin bed pushed against the wall, a pack-and-play setup in the corner, and a low bookshelf lined with children's books and a white noise machine. I blinked. This is my room. Claire turned to me, her smile unbothered. Yeah. It's next to the kids' room, super convenient. And Greg and I are in the master, obviously. Mom and Dad have the other guest suite upstairs. She didn't seem to notice the way I was gripping my suitcase handle. Before I could respond, Mom appeared behind me. We thought it made the most sense, she said. Claire and Greg need space, and we didn't want the kids waking them up at night. You're so good with them anyway, and they adore you. I stared at her. The view of the ocean in the distance seemed suddenly less spectacular. So, this was the plan. What do you mean? Claire asked, stepping into the room to fluff a throw pillow. You're practically their second mom already. Honestly, having you here is the best gift we could ask for. Like a built-in honeymoon bonus. She laughed like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I didn't laugh. I stood there still gripping the handle of my suitcase, watching her adjust stuffed animals on a bed that wasn't mine, in a room that wasn't meant for me, realizing I hadn't been invited to rest or to celebrate. I'd been summoned. And they were all smiling like I should be grateful. They handed me the baby like it was the most natural thing in the world. Claire smiled and said something about the bottle being in the mini fridge. Greg nodded toward the stroller as if I already knew how to collapse it. Then they just walked off. That first afternoon, I sat on the balcony of their honeymoon suite, holding a 6-month-old in my lap while my sister and her new husband got matching massages and champagne. I remember the sun warming my knees and the baby's tiny fingers tugging at my necklace. The view was stunning, ocean stretching out like glass, but I couldn't feel any of it. My arms ached from the flight, my head throbbed from jet lag, and yet there I was rocking someone else's child and wondering how I had let this happen. That night, Claire and Greg went to a private candlelit dinner on the beach. They returned just past 10, giggling like teenagers. I was pacing the living room trying to soothe a colicky baby who hadn't stopped crying for over an hour. When Claire came in, she barely glanced at me. Greg at least had the decency to ask if I needed anything. I said I was fine. I wasn't. By the third day, it wasn't just occasional help. I was on a full schedule. Morning bottles at 7, stroller walks before it got too hot, naps, diapers, meals, baths, lullabies. Claire had daily spa appointments. Greg had booked a half-day sailing trip for them and came back sunburned and smiling. I had a baby food stain on my shirt and hadn't sat down to eat anything other than leftover mac and cheese. When I finally confronted Mom, it was in the hallway outside our suite. I asked her point blank if she truly thought I came all the way to Malibu to be a nanny. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Claire just got married. She needs to rest and bond. You're good at this kind of thing. You've always been the one who can handle responsibility." I felt the sentence drop like a stone in my stomach. Always the one who could handle it, not the one who wanted to, not the one who got asked. That night, the baby woke up crying at 2 in the morning. I dragged myself out of bed, picked him up from the crib, and walked back and forth across the room with him pressed to my chest. His little heartbeat thumped against mine, fast and helpless. I stared out the window at the quiet waves, trying not to cry myself. I didn't even have a room to myself, just a cot set up in the corner of the suite. Greg and Claire had the master. My parents had the adjacent room. I had the job. By the end of the week, I started to notice the silence from my friends back home. I had barely posted anything. No one knew where I was, what I was doing. The only photo I had taken in Malibu was of a half-eaten plate of cold eggs at breakfast. Greg, to his credit, started to look uncomfortable. When Claire mentioned going shopping in town and Mom asked me to stay behind to watch the baby again, Greg hesitated. He said he could cancel. Claire gave him a look that said, "Don't you dare." I caught Greg alone on the balcony later that evening. He had a drink in his hand and he looked out at the ocean like it held answers. I asked him quietly if he thought this was fair. He exhaled long and slow and said he wasn't sure anymore. They didn't even try to pretend I was a guest. No one offered me a turn at the spa. No one asked if I wanted to visit the vineyard or try the paddleboards. When the concierge brought a tray of fresh strawberries and champagne flutes, he handed it straight to Claire with a smile, then looked at me and asked if I needed a fresh burp cloth. I didn't answer. I just took the tray and placed it on the coffee table right next to a pacifier and a copy of some wedding magazine Claire had half read. It became clear to me that I wasn't there to enjoy Malibu. I was there to fill in the blanks. Babysit, adjust, step aside. Make things easier for everyone else. That night, I took a long walk down the beach after everyone had gone to bed. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. I just needed air. The moonlight reflected on the waves in soft glimmers, and the sand felt cool beneath my feet. I sat on a driftwood log and listened to the ocean. For the first time in days, I thought about my own life. My job back home, my tiny apartment, my friends, who probably thought I was sipping cocktails on a yacht. I hadn't told them the truth. Not because I was ashamed, but because I was still figuring out how I had been tricked into thinking this trip was about family. In that moment, something shifted. I wasn't angry yet. Not fully. I was just awake. And in the soft quiet of the shoreline, I realized I was done being the reliable one. The one who never needed anything. The one who always came when called. I brushed the sand off my legs and stood up, looking back toward the glowing lights of the resort behind me. My footprints stretched back like a trail of small, hesitant decisions. I wouldn't erase them. but I was ready to make different ones, and I would. The baby bottle slipped from my fingers and clinked against the edge of the sink. I caught it before it fell, but the formula inside sloshed up and spilled across my wrist, warm and sticky. I wiped it on a dish towel and tried to breathe normally. From the open archway between the kitchen and the sunroom, I could hear my mother's voice clear as day. Light laughter, the clink of fine china, and then her soft, clipped tone as she spoke to her friends. Marissa was never quite right. Always too sensitive. This has been good for her, gives her something to do. Something that makes her feel useful. I couldn't move. The towel was still in my hands, but I wasn't holding it anymore. I was just standing there like someone had taken a remote and hit pause on my entire body. The words played again and again in my head. Something that makes her feel useful. That was me. That was what I had become to them. A task, a chore, a service. Not a daughter, not a guest. Not a human being with plans or feelings or even the right to say no. A bottle clattered in the drying rack and I flinched. Nora, now full and sleeping soundly in her bassinet, stirred for a moment and then settled. I walked outside without thinking, needing air, needing to escape the walls that felt like they were closing in on me. The patio lights were strung above in elegant swoops and the garden smelled like lemon blossoms and rosemary. But it didn't soothe me. I sat on the edge of a lounge chair, staring out toward the dark horizon of the Pacific. Somewhere inside the villa, Claire's laughter echoed loud and exaggerated. Probably still broadcasting herself to her followers, calling this her honeymoon. Her perfect honeymoon. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. Her live video was still going. The villa behind her glowed like a magazine spread. She twirled in a linen dress holding a wine glass. And look, she giggled to her audience. I even have help with the baby. Can you believe that week 1 of married life and I already have a built-in nanny? Total game changer. I shut the app. The humiliation didn't burn. It chilled, it froze. Because this wasn't impulsive or accidental. It was calculated, branded, marketed. I wasn't a person to her. I was a feature. An amenity she could brag about on the internet. Inside the villa, Vivian's voice rose again, airy and performative. She was telling one of her friends about the family vacation they had taken years ago, the one where Claire had insisted on sleeping in the same room with me so she wouldn't be scared of the wind. I had been 12. Claire was already 15. She hadn't been scared, she just didn't want me to be alone after my hamster died. But now hearing Mom retell it as if Claire had done it out of selfishness, twisting the memory until it sounded like a burden instead of kindness, made my stomach twist. That was always the story with Claire. Even the sweet moments, the rare flashes of closeness, were rewritten to make her the one who needed support. Who deserved the spotlight, who had reasons. And I was the backdrop. The steady one, the weird one. The one they never had to check in on. I used to wonder when that started. When I stopped being someone they cared about and became someone they managed. Maybe it was when I got sick in 5th grade and no one noticed until my teacher called home. Or when Claire started dating the guy I had a crush on in college, and when I cried, Mom told me maybe I should try being more confident like my sister. Or maybe it was earlier than all of that. Maybe I was just born to fill in the gaps, smooth the sharp edges, hold everything together. But no one had ever asked me if I wanted to. I stood up and went back inside, moving through the villa like a ghost. Nora was still sleeping. The tray of tea and macarons in the sunroom had barely been touched. The voices of the women rose and fell, warm and indulgent. I went into my room and shut the door behind me. The guest room was small, tucked at the end of the hallway. Not that I expected more, but it stung to know I had been placed as far away as possible from the main suite. From Claire. I sat on the bed and let my eyes adjust to the dim light. My suitcase was still by the closet, half unpacked. The dress I wore to Claire's wedding was hanging on the door. I hadn't planned on staying long. Just for the ceremony and the brunch the day after. Then somehow it became a few days, then a week. And now I had no return ticket. I picked up the phone again and opened my messages. There were 3 unread ones from Vivian sent a few days ago. Marissa, we're so grateful you're here. This is good for everyone. Especially you. Let me know if you need anything. But I think this is helping you find your purpose again. Love you. Don't forget to pick up more diapers. We'll reimburse you, of course." I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I locked the phone and dropped it on the nightstand. My purpose. That was what this was to them. A correction. A redirection. A rehabilitation of my life. Not because they cared, but because they needed someone to pick up what Claire wouldn't. Somewhere in the house I heard the soft cry of a baby waking. I didn't move right away. Eventually I did. But not because I was the nanny they had gifted without asking. Because Nora was innocent. Because she didn't ask to be born into this mess of a family. And because for now I was the only one who wouldn't fail her. I walked down the hallway slowly listening as the baby's cries turned into tiny hiccups. And I told myself I could survive this. At least for one more night. The morning sun filtered in through the gauzy curtains, soft and golden. I didn't hear the usual patter of feet or the thud of a dropped sippy cup. Just quiet. Peaceful. I left a note on the counter in the kitchen and closed the villa door behind me. One suitcase, one handbag, one plan. The taxi driver didn't ask questions. Just helped me load my things into the trunk and took the long scenic route along the Pacific coast. Malibu shimmered outside the window, all blue waves and ridiculous wealth. But in that moment, I didn't feel like a prisoner in someone else's story. I felt like a woman finally stepping into her own. 20 minutes later, I arrived at the Pacific Azure. Not the kind of place you find on discount booking apps. No screaming kids, no plastic pool toys. Just calm music, salt air, and white umbrellas stretching toward the water like elegant sails. The concierge introduced himself as Parker Linwood. He looked like someone out of a coastal lifestyle magazine, all crisp linen and sun-kissed confidence. When I said I'd be needing a room for 2 nights, maybe more, he didn't blink. He handed me a welcome mimosa and said the kitchen had just made lemon ricotta crepes if I was hungry. I was starving. Back at the villa, I imagined chaos. Claire had no patience for her own children, let alone the responsibility of 2 full days with them. And Greg could barely remember what temperature formula should be. I pictured Claire standing in the kitchen in her silk robe, one baby on her hip, the other wailing in a bouncer seat, her voice shrill echoing down the hall. Where is she? Who does she think she is? I didn't answer my phone. I didn't even check it. I was sitting on a shaded patio, a crepe on my plate, and a second mimosa in hand, looking out at the ocean. A waiter asked if I needed anything else. I said maybe a massage, or a nap. Or maybe just one more mimosa and 20 minutes of silence. Vivian called. Then texted. Then tried FaceTime. I watched the screen light up and fade again. Then I finally turned the phone on silent. Not airplane mode. Not off. Just enough to stop the buzzing. Reagan, on the other hand, didn't blow up my phone. She knew better. When I sent her a photo of my brunch and captioned it Independence Day, she replied with a simple heart. No follow-up, no questions. Just understanding. Meanwhile, back at the villa, according to Reagan, the meltdown had already begun. Claire had been caught off guard by the note. Apparently she assumed I would just keep giving and giving without question, without limit. When she called Vivian in a panic, Vivian tried to play it cool at first. Tried to act like I was being dramatic, going through a phase. But Claire wasn't buying it. She needed help, and suddenly her perfect honeymoon was unraveling in front of her very eyes. Greg offered to take the kids to the beach. That lasted 20 minutes. One tantrum, one diaper explosion, and one shoe lost in the surf. Later he returned to the villa defeated. Vivian sent me a string of texts trying a new angle. She said things like, "You're missing out on bonding time," and "The children love you so much," and "We thought this would be special for all of us." She never said sorry, not once. Not for springing this on me. Not for giving me as a gift. Not for speaking about me like I was property, and certainly not for ignoring every red flag leading up to this moment. I ordered lunch poolside. Something with crab and avocado and a drizzle of something citrusy. Parker checked in again, asking how my stay was so far. I told him it was the best decision I'd made all year. That evening, I booked a massage. 90 minutes. Deep tissue, no talking. After I slipped into a robe and sat in the spa's eucalyptus room. The quiet was so complete it almost startled me. My body felt like melted wax. My mind still sorting through the tangle. I wasn't angry. Not in the way I thought I'd be. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. I just wanted space. A little oxygen after years of holding my breath. I remembered something my college roommate once said the year I canceled spring break to fly home and help my mother care for Claire during her postpartum spiral. She told me, "You're not a person to them, you're a role." She was right, but now I wasn't playing that role anymore. And tomorrow I'd let the silence keep speaking for me. Parker met me at the breakfast patio with 2 cappuccinos in hand and sunglasses too expensive to be his. I didn't ask. He handed me one and nodded toward the ocean where a few early paddleboarders dotted the blue. We didn't say much. And that was the best part. I sat down in one of the white canvas loungers and let the salt air undo something tight in my chest I hadn't even noticed before. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was rushing through someone else's schedule. No crying toddlers, no grocery lists, no check-ins from Claire, and definitely no calls from Vivian pretending to be curious, but actually just tracking my every move. Parker broke the silence eventually. First solo vacation, I smiled and sipped. First time not carrying someone else's baggage. He didn't pry, just grinned and pulled out his sketchbook. Apparently, he was an illustrator for a card company in San Francisco. The way he bent over his notebook with quiet concentration made me think he was used to being overlooked like me. By the second afternoon, I started to notice things. The way I always checked my phone before letting myself relax, the phantom guilt when I ordered dessert. The way I almost texted Claire to ask how Riley was sleeping before remembering that I didn't owe her my concern anymore. That evening, I saw Vivian's post. It wasn't tagged, but I knew it was for me. A blurry photo of a sunset over the Malibu coastline with her caption in soft cursive font. A mother's heart never rests when her daughter disappears mid-vacation. Disappears. As if I'd vanished into thin air instead of stepping 3 blocks away from the resort they were still enjoying without me. I didn't like the tight, sour feeling her words stirred up, so I closed the app. Then came Claire's story. A muted video of Riley throwing her teething toy across the deck followed by a selfie with the caption, "Some sisters just walk away and leave the real ones behind." I didn't respond. I didn't even finish watching it. Instead, I opened my laptop for the first time since I arrived and created a new folder on my desktop. I named it The Truth. I didn't know exactly what I was collecting yet, but something inside me had shifted. I was tired of carrying the burden of everyone's narrative but my own. For too long, I had let them define me with sighs, silence, side eyes, and subtle guilt. I spent the next hour going through emails, screenshots, receipts. Little things I'd saved over the years without even realizing why. Bank transfers I'd made to cover Claire's rent. Confirmation emails from diaper orders when she said she couldn't afford them. A scanned note Vivian once left me after an argument. Just do what's right for the family. Funny how often what's right looked like what's convenient for them. I didn't know what I was building, but I knew what I wasn't doing anymore. I wasn't going to be their unpaid therapist, their emergency contact, or their human shield. Not in Malibu, not at home, not anywhere. Parker and I had dinner at a small seafood shack tucked behind a surf shop. He talked about a failed engagement with someone who made fun of his art. I listened, surprised at how much space there was in my head now that it wasn't stuffed with other people's emergencies. Back at the guest house, I stood barefoot on the balcony and watched the moonlight shimmer on the ocean. I thought about the last family dinner I'd attended. Claire had arrived 45 minutes late, and Vivian had blamed the caterer for the cold salmon. No one asked if I needed help setting up. No one noticed when I left the table early to clean up Riley's spilled juice. My absence had never been noticed when I was there. But now that I was gone, suddenly I was the disruption. The next morning, I walked past the main resort pool and spotted Claire in a cabana scrolling on her phone while a nanny I didn't recognize tried to comfort a screaming Riley. I kept walking. Parker found me later near the cliffs and handed me a coffee. "You look lighter today," he said. I shrugged. Maybe I just stopped picking up what doesn't belong to me. He smiled like he understood that too well. We sat quietly, the wind curling around our shoulders, the waves thrumming in the distance. Back in my room, I added a few more files to the truth. Not to weaponize. Not yet. Just to keep myself honest. I wasn't making this up. I wasn't being dramatic. I was done letting them edit me into the villain of their fairy tale. For the first time in years, I wasn't running. I was staying still and letting them deal with the echo of my silence. And somehow the quiet didn't scare me. It comforted me. It was the sound of freedom. Greg's voice came through the phone low and hesitant. I just talked to Claire. I stayed quiet. I was sitting on the patio of my small rental in Topanga Canyon, sipping tea that had long gone cold. The cicadas buzzed like they didn't care. She's a lot, he admitted. And you were right. About how she talks to people. About the way she acts like she's owed something. I tried to reason with her, but honestly, Marissa, I'm exhausted. I didn't know what to say. For the first time, he wasn't defending her. He exhaled, the sound brittle. I'm sorry, he said. I know it wasn't fair to expect you to step in like that. It's just. I was scared she'd hate me if I didn't back her up. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say that would make it better, and I wasn't interested in patching things up for anyone anymore. After a moment of silence, Greg added quietly, "You didn't deserve what happened. I just wanted you to know that." The line clicked off before I could even say thanks. That night, as I brushed my hair in front of the bathroom mirror, a message lit up my phone screen. It was from Mom. "If you love this family, you'll come back." That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement of the chaos they caused. Just guilt. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. My heart didn't race anymore. My chest didn't tighten. I simply felt done. I showed the message to Reagan the next morning over coffee. She raised an eyebrow and tossed her phone onto the kitchen island. Wow. Emotional blackmail at 8 a.m. Classic Vivian. I gave a tired laugh. She leaned over and took my hand. "We're backing all of it up," she said. "Every text, every voicemail. Even the stuff your mom's been saying to her church friends. My cousin Frankie helps manage a social media audit service. He's already pulled the public posts from her Facebook group. The lies are archived." That night, we sat cross-legged on the floor of Reagan's apartment going through screenshots and audio clips. One recording sent from a friend was of Mom telling someone at Bible study that I had offered to go to Malibu to help Claire and that I'd begged to be included. Reagan looked up from her laptop, jaw tense. She really said that? I nodded. I couldn't even muster a reaction anymore. It was surreal. The kind of gaslighting you'd expect from a movie villain. But this was just Tuesday for Vivian Prescott. Another ping. "Claire." The text read, "You know what? You're always doing this. Making people feel guilty for not catering to you." Then another. "Fine. I get it. You're too good for us now." Then another. "Please. I'm tired. I miss my sister." I stared at the words, not knowing which version of Claire was real. The cruel sister who dismissed me in Malibu, or the one who now claimed she missed me. And yet, both felt like manipulation. I set the phone down. If they wanted to twist my story in public, I would tell the truth. All of it. I pulled out the small DSLR I used to document weddings years ago. It was dusty but reliable. I set it on the table facing the couch. Clicked record. Saturday down. The room was quiet except for the hum of the fridge. "Hi," I said. Then I paused. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing this because silence only ever protected them. It never protected me. I took a deep breath. This is what happened. And I began. I told it plainly. About the flight. The so-called honeymoon, the baby, the insults. The message from Mom. The expectation that I would serve, smile, and disappear. And about the moment I left. The stillness. The first deep breath in years. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't cry. I just told the truth. When I finished, I turned off the camera. I sat there for a long moment staring at the blinking light as it faded to black. It didn't feel powerful, it felt necessary. The next day, I sent the file to a trusted friend who ran a small video podcast on family dynamics and narcissistic abuse. No names. No identifying details. Just a story. Let the world fill in the blanks if they recognize the patterns. I wasn't out for blood. I just wasn't going to be erased anymore. And I knew deep down that once the story was out there, they would come knocking again. But this time the door would stay shut. Parker didn't ask questions. He just set the tripod up, checked the lighting from the hotel desk lamp, and adjusted the mic on the small lavalier I'd clipped to my neckline. The space wasn't perfect, a cramped manager's office in the back of the hotel, but it was quiet, and for once I didn't care about perfection. I sat down, hands folded in my lap, staring at the red light blinking on the camera. Hi. My name is Emery. My voice sounded too steady, almost detached, but I kept going. I'm the oldest daughter of Lorraine and Douglas Whitmore. You probably don't know them, but maybe you've heard of my sister Delilah Whitmore. Influencer. Entrepreneur. The beach bride with the $1,000 sandals. I paused, looking down for a moment. I wasn't invited to her wedding. I wasn't even told about it. I found out the night before when our parents landed at LAX and told me I was flying to Malibu to nanny her new stepson. I blinked slowly, forcing myself not to let my voice crack. They didn't ask. They didn't pay. They said it would be good for me. That I owed Delilah my support. That I should feel honored to be included at all. I leaned forward slightly, hands trembling in my lap. This wasn't the first time they erased me. Growing up, I was the one who stayed quiet so Delilah could shine. When she quit ballet, I was forced to take her Saturday classes. When she lost a pageant, they said I made her feel worse by being too smart. They told me I was difficult, intense, unstable. By 13, I believed them. The first time I tried to run away, I got as far as the end of our street. My mom told the neighbors I was having a hormonal episode. My dad took my journal and read it at dinner. My sister laughed. I closed my eyes briefly. Parker sat behind the camera, silent. They sent me to a summer camp for troubled girls in Wisconsin when I was 15. It wasn't therapy, it was punishment. I was the only one who hadn't broken the law. I spent 3 months journaling in the woods, cleaning toilets, and writing letters home that were never answered. But I came back. I kept coming back. Until last week. Until Malibu. My breath caught. I glanced at the small photo in my lap and held it up to the lens. This is me and Hudson, Delilah's stepson. We spent 3 days together while his dad and my sister took sunset cruises and posted about their blended family bliss. She never changed a diaper. She never asked how he was sleeping. I was there in the bungalow behind the main house feeding him applesauce while they popped champagne. Then I showed the screenshot. This is the message I got from my mom the morning I left. She said I was being selfish for leaving without notice. That Delilah's brand launch needed all hands on deck and that I was making her look bad. I held up another image, my flight itinerary. Booked by Parker. Paid for by his own card. That was the first time someone had done something for me without wanting anything in return. I looked back at the lens. I'm not making this video for revenge. I'm making it because there are people out there who know what it's like to be the family's scapegoat. To be labeled too much or not enough. To be told your feelings are a burden, your needs are embarrassing. You are not alone. My voice finally cracked. I didn't edit it out. The camera light blinked off. I sat there for a long moment before looking at Parker. He nodded once gently. You want to see it? I hesitated, then handed him the camera. He transferred the file to my laptop, pulled up the video editor, and trimmed the beginning and end. We didn't add music. No filters, no dramatic effects. 8 minutes. I sent it to 2 people. First to Reagan. She called within 5 minutes. I don't even know what to say, she whispered. This is. It's everything. It's so clear. I was afraid it would sound petty, I admitted. Number. It's dignified. Honest. It's like you're finally taking your place back. Then I sent it to Jessica, my cousin, who used to sneak me gummy worms under the table at every holiday dinner. The one who saw things but was always too scared to name them. 10 minutes later, she texted. I cried. "You're not alone. Post it." I stared at her message. Then I looked at Parker, who'd been sitting quietly sipping cold coffee from a paper cup. "Think it's too much?" "No," he said simply. "I think it's just enough." I clicked open my browser, hovered over the upload button on my video channel. It had 0 subscribers, one old video of a dog from 4 years ago. I uploaded it under the title "To the Sister Who Forgot I Was Family." As the progress bar loaded, I looked out the hotel window. The Pacific was calm, almost unnaturally so, like it had been holding its breath. So was I. The video went live at 3:12 p.m. And by 3:38 someone had already tagged Delilah. The video was already climbing by the time I poured my second cup of coffee. At 9:00 a.m. sharp I hit publish. A quiet Monday morning in Malibu. The kind that smelled of sea salt and jasmine, where tourists lined up for smoothies and the yoga moms carried pressed juices like peace offerings. And yet, tucked behind their curated routines, my story rippled like a hairline crack through polished glass. By noon it had crossed 10,000 views. 3,000 shares. My inbox pulsed with names I didn't recognize. Notifications blinked like a heartbeat. On Reddit, someone pinned it under a trending thread, "When the Forgotten Sister Finally Speaks." My name wasn't even in the title. But they knew. I had told the truth. Not vindictive, not dramatized, just unfiltered. I expected silence. Or maybe a few private messages from distant acquaintances pretending to care. What I didn't expect was the storm. The first wave came from my mother's generation. Church ladies with names like Nancy and Doreen. They flooded the comment sections on Facebook and tagged me in their posts. Disgraceful, ungrateful. A daughter should never shame her parents in public. Some threw around the word un-American like I had lit a flag on fire. But right beneath their outrage bloomed something unexpected. A garden of solidarity. So many women pushed back. They wrote things like I was always the babysitter. They called me cold because I set boundaries. I walked my sister down the aisle while our parents pretended she was an only child. I gave up my scholarship so my brother could keep playing soccer. I wasn't alone. There were thousands of us. And suddenly, I wasn't the girl crying on a bench outside a Malibu beach house anymore. I was part of a quiet revolution of sisters who never had bedrooms with doors that locked. Who were asked to give, then blamed for disappearing. Some stories were long, others just a sentence. But each one stitched itself into my ribs like a suture I hadn't known I needed. Then came Jessica. I hadn't spoken to her in almost 2 years. We were never close. She was part of Vivian's world. Same tennis club. Same book club. Same designer tote bags that cost more than my rent. Her name lit up my screen mid-afternoon. I braced for an attack. Instead, she wrote, "I watched the whole thing twice." I cried. "I thought I was the only one who remembered what Vivian did to you." Then she posted her own story. 1,000 words that laid it bare. How Vivian always made you the backup plan. How your mother forced you to cancel college visits to chaperone Claire's dance trips. How you sat in the car in the rain outside Delilah's kindergarten because they forgot to call you the nanny and you weren't allowed inside. She signed it with one line that made my throat close. I wish I had said something sooner. I'm sorry I stayed quiet. It didn't fix the past. But for the first time, someone from inside the circle cracked the glass. Then came the podcast request. It was from Lydia Monroe, a name I recognized instantly. She ran the top show on women and power dynamics in family systems, part true crime, part memoir, part healing ritual. She had over 1 million subscribers and a way of making silence sound sacred. Her producer sent a direct message. Would I consider speaking on air? I sat there staring at my screen. My hand hovered over the reply button. Part of me panicked. I wasn't a performer. I didn't have rehearsed sound bites. What if I stumbled? What if my voice cracked? What if I cried and the world called me unstable? But another voice, smaller but steadier, whispered something else. What if you didn't stay silent this time? What if you told the truth and let it land however it needed to? I didn't respond right away. I just bookmarked it. Breathed. Let the idea settle like sediment in still water. That evening the sun dipped low over the ocean, casting gold through the kitchen window. Marissa sat across from me at the table, her face lit by the screen of her tablet. She was scrolling through comments, her finger frozen over one in particular. She turned the screen to me. It was from Vivian. Not a public comment. A message request. I didn't read the whole thing. Just the first line. You've made your point. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a sentence that reeked of control dressed up as diplomacy. I closed the tablet. They weren't angry because I lied. They were angry because I told the truth and people believed me. Later that night, Marissa made us popcorn and we sat on the floor wrapped in blankets like we used to do when we were kids during thunderstorms. She looked at me sideways and said, "Do you think they'll come here?" I didn't need to ask who she meant. They might. What would you say if they did? I stared at the screen. A paused frame of my own face mid-sentence caught in motion. I looked different. Not angry. Just clear. I'd say, "I'm not your secret anymore." Marissa reached out and took my hand. "No one gets to put you in a corner again." Her voice cracked on the last word. I didn't cry. Not then. But when she went to bed, I sat on the deck alone, knees tucked to my chest, and let the ocean air sting my eyes. Not because I was sad. Because I had taken something back that no one could ungive. My voice. My name. And if they were watching, which I knew they were then, they would have to sit with that silence now. Because I wasn't coming back to fix what they broke. I was only moving forward. And for the first time in a decade, I didn't need their permission to do it. Greg's number flashed across my screen just as I finished brushing my hair. I didn't hesitate. I picked up, unsure if I expected an apology or another desperate attempt to defend my parents. What I heard instead caught me off guard. His voice was low, steady, but laced with exhaustion. "I filed for legal separation today." I sat down slowly on the edge of the hotel bed. "I can't let the kids grow up thinking this is normal." He continued. "This pattern of guilt and silence and pretending things are okay just because someone brought over a casserole." I didn't speak for a moment. He wasn't calling to place blame. He was calling because he was finally drawing a line. I told Vivian I was staying in Portland. With the kids. I'll figure out the rest. But I'm done watching them unravel everything decent in the name of family loyalty. I whispered, "Thank you." He didn't say anything back, just a long breath before hanging up. An hour later, Parker knocked gently and handed me his tablet. "I thought you might want to see this." It was a video call recording. Claire must have saved it from her end. In the screen, Vivian was curled in her silk robe, crying like she was auditioning for sympathy. Claire was pacing behind her, wineglass in hand, shouting into the camera. "What did you say to Greg?" She was shrieking into the mic. I could barely understand the words. Vivian was sobbing. "He thinks I'm toxic now. He's blaming me. He thinks I pushed him away. And now the courts are involved." Claire turned, nearly slamming her glass on the table. "You gave her too much space. Mom, that's what you did. You babied her, and look how she's repaying you." Then she leaned toward the camera, eyes narrow and voice bitter. "If you wanted a performance, Marissa, you should have stayed in community theater." I watched the screen flicker and catch on Claire's face just as she raised her hand to throw the wineglass. The video ended with a loud crash and a startled cry from Vivian. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I turned off the tablet and slid it back across the table. "You okay?" Parker asked carefully. "Yeah." Just confirming I made the right decision. That night, he took me to dinner at the rooftop restaurant of the hotel. It overlooked the Pacific, the warm Malibu air brushing against our faces. There were candles on the table, soft jazz in the background. And for once, I wasn't checking a baby monitor or passing crayons across a sticky table. It was strange at first. The quiet, the lack of demands. No diaper bag tucked under my chair. No split check to rush. Just a plate of perfectly grilled salmon and a glass of Pinot Noir. I looked across the table at Parker. He was watching me like I was something he wasn't sure he deserved to witness. "You know," he said, slowly, "I don't think you ever got to just exist without being on call for someone else." I laughed softly. Maybe that's true, but it's not anymore. We ate slowly, talked about his work in renewable housing and my old dream of designing children's books. I told him how I once illustrated a story about a bear who lost his name and went on a journey to find it. I said it like a joke, but he leaned forward like I just confessed something sacred. You should finish it. The dinner ended with a walk down to the beach. The water shimmered with the moonlight, and I left my heels at the steps. We walked barefoot, waves licking our ankles. Do you regret coming to Malibu? He asked quietly. Not anymore, I meant it. By the time we got back to the suite, I had dozens of unread messages. One was from Claire. Just a screenshot of the local gossip blog. The headline read, "Top real estate couple files for separation amid rumors of family rift." Another was from Vivian, "Please call. I'm falling apart here." I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but because I finally understood that not all crises are mine to fix. Instead, I made tea. I sat on the balcony. And I opened a blank page in my sketchbook. The bear was still there. Still waiting for his name, and maybe this time he'd find it. The flight back to San Francisco felt longer than it should have, even though the skies were clear and smooth the whole way. I sat by the window in silence, watching the coastlines shift beneath the clouds. Everything was calmer now, but it didn't mean the weight was gone. I wasn't the same person who had left the city weeks ago, and I knew the version of me they once dismissed would never come back. Reagan was waiting at the gate, arms open, eyes a little teary. He didn't say much at first. Just wrapped me in a hug so tight I could feel my ribs shift. He pulled back and said softly, "This time you really did win." I didn't say anything. I just nodded because we both knew what he meant. Not about lawsuits or family squabbles, but something deeper. I had fought for myself. And this time I hadn't backed down. The ride home was quiet, the kind of silence that felt earned, not awkward. When we pulled into the driveway, Reagan helped with my bags and made a pot of coffee, even though it was past 8 in the evening. We sat on the couch, the living room dimly lit, and scrolled through the news feeds like we were looking at someone else's life. Vivian had finally taken down her original post. The one with the perfect family portrait on the Malibu shore and the caption about her blessed honeymoon. It had disappeared quietly without apology or explanation. But the internet never really forgets. Screenshots had made their rounds already. TikToks analyzing the family drama. Reddit threads dissecting timelines. Instagram accounts resharing the side-by-side of my childhood photos used to promote Claire's mommy blog brand. Some of it felt like justice. Some of it just felt exhausting. Reagan handed me his phone. On the screen was a scanned letter from Pastor Donnelly. Reagan had picked it up from our mailbox earlier that day. He wrote, "Marissa, I urge you to forgive your mother. Family is a blessing, not a burden. You've both made mistakes. The Lord calls us to unity, not division." I rolled my eyes. The kind of deep, tired roll that came from hearing that line for too many years. But beneath the postscript, someone had scribbled a note in shaky cursive. A woman I vaguely remembered from church potlucks. She wrote, "My daughter was treated like you. I wish she'd spoken up sooner. Thank you for your strength." I stared at those words longer than I expected. Not because they healed anything, but because they proved something. I hadn't imagined it. I wasn't overreacting. And maybe I wasn't alone. That night, I lay in bed with the window cracked open. The cool San Francisco air drifted in, carrying the distant hum of cable cars and a few city dogs barking down the block. I breathed it in like something holy. My phone buzzed around 10. Greg. It was a video call. I hesitated before answering. But curiosity, or maybe something softer, nudged me to swipe. Elliot's face filled the screen first. His hair was a little longer and his cheeks still had that baby roundness. Then Nora popped in beside him, grinning wide with 2 front teeth missing. "Aunt Marissa, we saved a cookie for you." Greg was behind them, off to the side, holding the phone steady. He didn't say anything at first. Just let them talk. "We made them with Mommy," said Nora, bouncing slightly. Then she whispered loudly, "Daddy ate 3. I smiled. It wasn't a full smile, but it was more than I'd managed in days. "Tell her about the jar," Elliot said. Greg stepped in a little closer. "We made a cookie jar at school. Each of us put something inside for someone we miss. He turned the camera toward the kitchen table. There was a glass jar painted in smudgy colors, glitter sticking to the rim. Elliot said I put a paper heart inside. It says, "Marissa knows the truth." I didn't expect the sting in my eyes, or how my throat tightened. I cleared it gently. "That's a very smart heart," I said. Greg looked at me then. Really looked. "They miss you. I miss you. I know I didn't protect you the way I should have." I let the silence stretch. Not because I didn't have words, but because I didn't know which ones were safe yet. When I spoke, it came out steady. "You don't need to fix anything, Greg. Just raise them better." He nodded. I could see the regret behind his eyes. But also something else, respect maybe. Or finally acknowledgement. Before hanging up, Nora leaned into the screen. "We love you, Aunt Marissa. Can we come visit?" I said yes without thinking. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week. But someday. After the call ended, I sat there for a while, the screen gone black in my hand. I thought about the last few months. About how I had been gifted like a prop on someone else's honeymoon. About the version of myself I almost lost in that guest room. But the truth was, I had saved something too. I had saved my voice. My dignity. My right to be seen. I opened the drawer beside my bed and pulled out a small notebook. On the first page I wrote, "They called it overreacting, but I call it remembering." Then I closed the book, turned off the lamp, and let the darkness come. Not because I was afraid of it, but because I had lived through worse. And somewhere across the city, I knew the silence in their house wasn't peaceful. It was the sound of consequences. I didn't want revenge. Not anymore. I wanted space. Peace. A version of my life that didn't revolve around what my family thought I owed them. So that night, while the city softened into dusk outside my apartment window, I opened my laptop, clicked on the thread titled Family, and hovered over it for a second longer than I needed to. Then I clicked delete. The chat disappeared, taking with it years of ignored messages, group photos I was never in, holiday plans I was always left out of. My thumb hovered again, this time over my profile. I removed every trace of them from my feed. No more smiling pictures that only served to keep up appearances. No more captions pretending I was grateful for people who had carved me out of the family like I was excess marble. My social media went quiet. My world didn't. I drafted a message to my mother, but didn't send it right away. I let it sit in my drafts for a few hours while I cleaned the apartment, made tea, let my thoughts settle. When I came back to it, I didn't edit a word. If you want to have a relationship with me, you have to begin with an apology. Not a performance, not a story about how hard things were for you, just an apology. And not to get me back. Just because it's right. I signed it simply Marissa. Then I hit send. There was no dramatic swoop of regret afterward. Just quiet. The real kind. The kind that comes when you finally close a door you've been propping open for too long out of guilt. The next morning, I submitted my leave of absence to the firm. It was time. I'd built my career with precision, but I had built none of myself in the process. I didn't want to be one of those women who only knew how to chase approval in a blazer. I didn't book a flight or run off to Bali like the women in the articles do. I stayed in the city, bought myself a canvas and some brushes from a little shop tucked between a laundromat and a bakery. I found a studio space with good light and silence that didn't ask for explanations. The air smelled like turpentine and possibility. I painted. I didn't know what I was painting at first. It didn't matter. It wasn't for an exhibition or approval. It was just something that let me exist in color and motion in a place my family couldn't define or access. One afternoon, while mixing a strange shade of blue-green that reminded me of the ocean near Bodega Bay, my phone lit up with a message. It was Parker. He wrote, "I'll be in San Francisco next week. If you ever want coffee, I know a place that doesn't have anyone named Claire in it." I stared at the message for a long moment and then laughed. Out loud. The sound startled me. It had been so long since I'd heard myself laugh without restraint, without checking the room to see who was watching. I typed back. "Let me pick the place this time," he responded within seconds. "You got it. Saturday work for you?" I looked around the studio. The light was good. The painting was drying, and my chest didn't feel tight. Saturday works. That night, I walked to the corner market. The woman behind the counter, whom I'd seen for years but never really noticed, complimented the scarf I was wearing. I thanked her, asked her name. Her name was Inez. She smiled when I used it. It felt good. It felt like beginning. Later, as the sun lowered and bathed the city in soft amber, I stood at my window watching people live their lives like I finally had permission to join them. I didn't know if my mother would respond. Maybe she would. Maybe she wouldn't. But I'd said what I needed to say. For once, it wasn't about their reaction, it was about mine. And mine was this: I had let go. Not with bitterness, not with some grand goodbye. Just release. I pulled on a sweater, grabbed my keys, and stepped out into the cool evening air. I walked without a plan, without a timeline. I wandered into a bookstore, flipped through novels I might actually have time to read now. I found a copy of one I used to love as a teenager and bought it without checking the price. No one needed to approve. Back home, I made myself pasta from scratch, played old jazz on vinyl, and danced while the water boiled. I was still alone. But it didn't feel like loneliness anymore. It felt like agency. Like room to breathe. A notification pinged on my phone. An email. From my mother. Subject line: I read your message. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit. Not as punishment. But because I was no longer rushing to be someone's daughter, I was just being myself. And she would have to wait until I was ready. I turned off the light in the kitchen, curled up on the couch, and opened my book. For the first time in years, the silence around me didn't ache. It sang. A month later, I heard my own voice through someone else's speaker. It was late afternoon when the new episode of the podcast Family Lines dropped. I wasn't waiting for it, but Reagan texted me the link with a simple message. You're ready. I listened alone, sitting on my small porch with a cup of chamomile tea and the soft hum of cicadas in the distance. My voice sounded different than I remembered, stronger, steadier. I talked about boundaries. About how hard it is to draw a line when everyone you love keeps erasing it. About the day I walked out of my childhood home and the day I finally stopped hoping they would follow me. I didn't cry. I didn't ask for pity. I just told the truth. Not to wound. Not to win. But because healing demands honesty, even if it only ever happens in whispers. A few days later, Greg officially moved back into the home he grew up in, the one just 5 blocks from his parents' church. He enrolled the girls in a preschool around the corner and posted a photo of their first day on his Instagram. His mother commented a heart emoji. I didn't like the photo. I didn't call to ask how the girls were settling in. I trusted that they were okay. And I trusted that I would be too. Claire never responded to my last message. Not a text. Not a like on the podcast link. Nothing. But silence from Claire was no longer an emergency in my body. Just space. Vivian did reach out. Just one line. When are you coming home? I looked at the message for a long time. Thought about what she meant by home. The address, the role, the version of me that used to walk on eggshells just to keep the peace. I didn't respond. Because some questions don't deserve answers, they deserve reflection. And a woman who's still learning to breathe without shrinking doesn't owe anyone an arrival time. Instead, I poured myself another cup of tea. And I RSVP'd to something else entirely. Reagan had invited me to speak at one of her group sessions. The theme was setting boundaries without guilt, and she called the session Saving Yourself Isn't Betrayal. She smiled when she introduced me and told the group I was someone who knew what it meant to stand up quietly but completely. I spoke with my palms open. No cue cards, no script. Just truth I had carried for years, now set free like paper lanterns into a night sky. I told them how sometimes the hardest thing isn't leaving, it's believing you're allowed to leave. That your worth isn't measured by how much pain you can tolerate for the comfort of others. When it ended, a woman in the second row reached for my hand. She didn't say anything, she just squeezed, and I understood. Afterwards, Parker met me outside. He had waited in the car out of respect. Not because he wasn't proud, but because he knew I needed this space to be mine alone. We walked together to a small cafe tucked into the corner of an old street where the trees still bowed slightly as if remembering what they used to shelter. The air smelled like ground cinnamon and strong coffee. We didn't speak much. We didn't have to. Inside, we sat across from each other in a booth by the window. He slid a plate of lemon scones toward me without asking. I smiled and took one. Outside, a group of kids raced past on scooters, their laughter bouncing off brick walls like music. Parker reached across the table and lightly touched my wrist. Just enough to say I'm here without needing to be dramatic about it. For a long time, I had mistaken love for performance. For declarations. For sacrifice. But there in that cafe with crumbs on the table and a gentle presence across from me, I realized something else. Love could be quiet. Love could be showing up without fixing. Witnessing without controlling. Staying without needing to be needed. The sky outside had turned to a soft golden wash, the kind of light that made even the sidewalks look kind. I thought of the version of me who used to count apologies like currency. Who twisted herself into a shape that fit into everyone's expectations but her own. She was gone now. And in her place sat a woman with her own name, her own peace, and the knowledge that she didn't need to be chosen to be whole. I didn't go back to my parents' house. I didn't write some dramatic letter. I didn't attend Greg's church service just to prove a point. Some victories don't look like fireworks. They look like a quiet morning. A full breath. A clean plate. A voice on a podcast telling the truth and not flinching. I am no longer the gift wrapped neatly for someone else's comfort. I am not the extra seat at the table. I am not the scapegoat or the secret. I am me. And for the first time, that is enough. Thank you for listening to my story. If it meant something to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, you're not alone. Tap like, subscribe for more stories like this, and share it with someone who needs to hear they're allowed to choose themselves too.